Do you know what happens to Palestinian children when they are arrested and tried in Israeli military courts? Let's explore this further. Israel is the only country in the world that tries from 500 to 700 children per year in military courts. And in the process from arrest to trial and to incarceration, a lot of abuse also happens, which is recorded and reported. For my discussion, I'll be relying on two reports. One by UNICEF, which came out in 2013, and it offers its observations and recommendations for the defense-led prosecutorial and arrest system in West Bank, Gaza, and sometimes parts of East Jerusalem. And the second report that I'll be relying on is from 2023 from Defense for Children International and their Palestinian office. The UNICEF report provides us overarching details of what is the UN Convention on Rights of Children and how they observed the violations of it in the occupied territories of Palestine by the Israeli armed forces. And they have a set of recommendations at the end. The Defense for Children report gives us the granular report of testimonies and data collected from over 700 children. And it also gives us the number of children, their ages, and for how long were they confined and incarcerated. It gives us the details of their experience from arrest, transportation, their arraignment to their trial, and then their sentencing, and then what happens to them after sentencing. These are the two reports I'll be relying on. I will also point to, in this process of discussing this, the international law and how it is violated by the State of Israel and its armed forces. Now let us first look at the international law that governs legal rights of children, especially in circumstances where they need to be arrested. And that is Article 37 of the Conventions on the Rights of the Child. Now, Article 37 states, A, no child shall be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, neither capital punishment nor life imprisonment without possibility of release shall be imposed for offenses committed by persons below 18 years of age. B. No child shall be deprived of his or her liberty unlawfully or arbitrarily. The arrest, detention, or imprisonment of a child shall be in conformity with the law and shall be used only as a measure of last resort and for the shortest appropriate period of time. C. Every child deprived of liberty shall be treated with humanity and respect for the inherent dignity of the human person, and in a manner which takes into account the needs of persons of his or her age. In particular, every child deprived of liberty shall be separated from adults unless it is considered in the child's best interest not to do so, and shall have the right to maintain contact with his or her family through correspondence and visits, save in exceptional circumstances. D. Every child deprived of his or her liberty shall have the right to prompt access to legal and other appropriate assistance, as well as the right to challenge the legality of the deprivation of his or her liberty before a court or other competent, independent, and impartial authority, and to a prompt decision on any such action. These are some of the rights of children under United Nations law. That means every nation which is a signatory to the UN Charter has to follow these. And these laws absolutely apply to the children in occupied territories too. So our next question then is, how is it that the Israeli armed forces since 1967 still get to run the military court system within the occupied territories in Gaza and sometimes in East Jerusalem? How have they, within the national legal system, regularized it? Now, according to international law, under occupation, the people under occupation are still governed by their own local laws. But there is a security exception. And if there is a security exception, the occupiers can install a military court system and a system of justice that deals with the cases in occupied territories. And it is this exception in the international law that Israel has used to construct an elaborate system run by the Israeli military, which starts with arrests, transportation, interrogations, court trials, appeals, and incarceration. Every single aspect of this process for Palestinian children is conducted by Israeli armed forces. So most of the Israeli military actions in the occupied territories are governed under Military Order 1651, which was promulgated in 2010, and there have been several amendments to it, and local commanders have ordered further orders and amendments to that. So the general framework of law and the legal system within the occupied territories, even though the Israeli troops withdrew to the fringes of it post-Oslo, is that everything is controlled by the military. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, both these reports that I mentioned earlier deal with every aspect of this legal system. So, the UNICEF report mentions what happens in the arrest stage. In their observation, most of the times the children are arrested at night. There are loud noises, loud bangs in the house. The children are captured. Their parents are made to wait aside or outside the house. They are transported immediately, and in most of the cases, the parents are neither told where they are being taken, what they have done, and what the charges are. That's the arrest stage, which automatically itself is frightening and causes trauma. The transportation happens in military vehicles. Children's hands are tied, and most of the times they are blindfolded. They are sometimes made to lie on the hard floor of the vehicle, and they are either taken directly to an interrogation center or to a local Jewish settlement in the area. Sometimes they wait there overnight and then are brought to an interrogation center. In so many cases, they are neither offered any food nor they have any facilities to go to the bathroom available to them. In the interrogation center, according to the UNICEF report, no legal representation is provided to these children, sometimes interviewed by military personnel, sometimes by police, sometimes people in civilian clothes. But their parents are not present and they have no legal representation. Then in the interrogation stage, they are often offered forms to sign which are not even in Arabic, they are in Hebrew. Sometimes the confessions have been extracted from these children, which are written in Hebrew. a language that Palestinian children are not taught and they cannot read or write it. And then they are brought to a juvenile military court. Now, previously, there were no separate juvenile military courts. But eventually, the Israelis did establish juvenile military courts. Now, here is the thing. Israel is the only country in the world that has a juvenile military court. Now, the problems that the UNICEF team observed there is that sometimes the judges are not trained. Sometimes, even if the case is with the juvenile court, the processing happens alongside adults. And sometimes a case could start in a normal court and then be shifted to a juvenile court. And throughout, there is not much legal representation available to the child. Now, if we go back to the interrogation phase, remember the UN Charter and the UN rules suggest that children shall be in correspondence with their parents and they should be able to stay in touch with their parents. Sometimes these children are transported across the border into Israeli territory and the parents can't even get a permit to visit them. And then, of course, when the sentencing happens, they are sent to a military prison. Now, here are some of other observations from the UNICEF report which we need to keep in mind. Most of the time, it's 16 to 17-year-old males who are targeted and brought into the juvenile system. Now, this again contravenes the very intent of child protection international law, where it is recommended that children not be incorporated within a criminal system. So the idea is to capture as many young Palestinians, males, from 12 to 16 years of age and then put them in the system. Now, a lot of times after these interrogations, the children confess and then they are prosecuted based on that confession. There are also instances where they are either coerced into a confession or they are forced to convince them to join the Israeli armed forces, maybe as their spies or whatever. And instances of violence and torture were also reported, especially the torture in transit, where they were so harshly restrained. And according to the UNICEF report, the doctors who saw that would see that abuse and say nothing about it. There was an amendment in the military law in which now it has been decided, I don't know if it has been implemented or not, that 3 restraints would be used, the plastic ties. 1 on each hand, and then they will be connected with the 3rd one. Now, if you are a nation that has to legislate that, how children will be restrained in military courts, then seriously, God help you, but that's also in the Israeli law. So overall, this architecture of military law has been established because there is an exception, a security exception within the international law. On that exception, then an entire framework of justice system run by the military, executed by the military, has been established. Military has its own interrogation cells. They have their own arresting teams. They have their own transportation, and they have their own court. And that's how this entire system is built. And the abuses, legal and physical, have been reported by UNICEF and DCI, Defense for Children International. Both the reports I've shared with you, and I'll post the link in the description. Now, also please bear in mind that we're not talking about children who have murdered someone or not. Majority of these children who are arrested for throwing stones at the occupation forces. And the punishment for that can be from 10 to 20 years in prison. So this roughly is the framework of a system which I personally cannot call a justice system. It should be called an injustice system. And do bear in mind that it is an apartheid justice system because there are illegal settlements in the West Bank, right? All settlements in the West Bank are by international law illegal, but they're there. Now, the military law does not apply to the settlers. It only applies to Palestinians. So that means that the occupation, its implications and its power is only enforced upon Palestinian bodies. It's the Israeli civil and penal code that deals with the settlers. But here is also another side effect of it. When the settlers attack Palestinian properties, their orchards, their homes even, the army cannot protect them. They are not allowed to touch the settlers. They have to call the civilian police to handle that. But if they see a couple of young Palestinian men by a bypass or by a settlement, they have the authority to arrest them and they have the authority to shoot them without any consequences. That is what we and so many others in the world are pointing out. That is the apartheid nature of this illegal occupation. Now let's move on to some of the information, the granular information that DCI in their report have shared with us. They interviewed more than 776 children, and we can look at their age ranges and then what kind of abuse did they report and see what we think of it then. Now, I do apologize. To me personally, and maybe to you, this is painful knowledge. It hurts. But we have to confront it. We have to talk about it. We have to bring it out. These reports have been available for years, right? At least one of them. But how many people go out and read these reports? Do you think the US State Department hasn't read them? The CIA hasn't read them? President Biden's people, do you think they don't know what this is going on? Obviously they know, but the reason they can set it aside is because you, me, and everyone else doesn't know. So one reason I'm recording this, even though more detailed reports are available, is so that you can access it, so that you can pass it on to others. This story that I am sharing with you in solidarity with Palestinian children, so that we can point to these things for change, right? So I will now move on to discussing the DCI report, which, as I said, gives us some granular human level information about what goes on in the occupation military court system. Now, DCI provides us this map of the entire network of the occupation court and justice system. They also tell us that they interviewed for this report 776 children. What were their age ranges? Age range 11 years, there were 3 children. From 12 to 13 years, 21 children. 14 to 15 years, 198 children. 16 to 17 years, 544 children. A total of 766 children. These were the number of children that they interviewed. Now, they do tell us in the report that no leading questions were asked of children, but they were given a set of questions. And it's the children who testify to what happened to them, what kind of abuse and what did they suffer during the entire process. Then they also share with us the kind of abuse suffered by the children in the entire process. And you can look at the statistics. Night arrest, 449 cases of children were arrested at night. Hands bound, 745. The total number is 766. Verbal abuse, humiliation, and intimidated, 448 children reported that. Denial of food and water, 318 children reported that. Exposure to elements, 117. Strip search, 615 of these children were strip searched. And then you can look at all the figures. Threats and coercion, 278. Threats of sexual assault, 5. Stress positions that they were asked to take in the arrest were 194 children reported that. Shown or signed documents in Hebrew that they could not read, 397 of them. And then confined with adults, 41 children. 41 children were put in a place where they were in detention with adults. I don't know at what stage of the trial. So these are some of the figures that DCI has collected after thorough interviews with children who are either in the system and or have been free now. DCI also now represents quite a lot of these children. They have a legal arm. Now, for your information, DCI, along with 5 other organizations, I think 2 years ago was declared a terrorist organization. Their offices were ransacked, their computers were confiscated, but Amnesty International, United Nations groups, and quite a few members of the European Union basically told Israel they will not stop working with these organizations. And as for my knowledge, I was in touch with DCI to get some information 2 days ago. It looks like they are still functional. So their report is methodical and to the international standards. Now, in their report, they also include about 4 testimonies, 4 case studies of young people who were incarcerated and who weren't even charged, who were kept under administrative detention one after the other, and the judges, military judges, kept extending it. Let me give you one example. This is Laith Harma. He was arrested on September 20, 2017 at night at 2 a.m. The Israeli soldiers entered his home outside Ramallah. He was bound, blindfolded, and physically assaulted by Israeli forces, and he was given no reason for his arrest. For the next 11 hours, he was transferred multiple times to different locations. He then arrived at Offer military compound around 1 p.m. During interrogation, he was questioned about throwing stones at security forces. Interrogator printed out a statement both in Arabic and Hebrew, and that afternoon he had his first appearance before a military court at the Offer military court. It was there that he first learned the Israeli military authorities were going to detain him. The detention first extended for 72 hours. He was never informed of the reason for his detention, not in his court appearances and not in the beginning. 6 days after he was detained, a military judge approved a 4-month administrative detention order against Laith. and it was renewed in 2018 for an additional 4 months. On August 6, 2018, more than 6 weeks prior to September 7 expiration of his third administrative detention, Israeli forces released Leith without explanation. He spent nearly 46 weeks in military detention and was never formally charged with a crime. So this is what is called forced detention. According to international law, not only are you supposed to be, if you're a minor especially, you're supposed to be informed what crime you have committed. Your parents need to be given a notice. You need to be interrogated in the presence of a lawyer and your guardians. You need to have representation in the court when you are charged. And you need to have the right to appeal. In Leith's case, no case was brought against him. He remained in custody for 46 weeks on administrative detention. Detention that was extended one after the other. Now, this is one example. I'm sharing it because in this video, mostly, I have relied on the law and statistics. But incarceration and mistreatment of children under occupation army military rules is not just about statistics. It's a human story, right? It's about human dignity and especially protecting children and not incarcerating them and putting them in a military prison system. Now, here is an instructive aside. When you saw the first exchange of Palestinian prisoners and the Israeli hostages between Hamas and the Israeli armed forces, did you notice something peculiar about the Palestinian prisoners? Majority of them were women. And quite a lot of them were children. Actually, the youngest one of them was 14 years old. So do you want to know why Hamas is so popular? This is one reason. I am not going to argue about the morality of taking hostages and doing this. I'm not in their position. I will not do that. I don't condone taking civilians as hostages. But this teaches us that it's not as simple as American politicians will have us believe. That Palestinians aren't by their very nature violent. That if you treat human beings the way occupying forces treat Palestinians in their so-called court system, it is going to cause more resentment, more rebellion, more uprisings. And I also have a general question for ourselves as human beings, for you, wherever you live, right? Will we ever accept such arbitrary treatment by a military force, a court system, for our own children? United States, the most powerful country in the world, their leaders never get tired of speaking about the light and our mission and human dignity and the American dream. Mr. Biden, Mr. Trump, you can't expect much from Trump, right? Because he doesn't know anything. What people tell him, he will do. And he's not an empathetic person. But Biden is experienced, knows the world, right? Do you think he doesn't know what's going on in occupied territories? Do you think Secretary Blinken, who is a specialist on the Middle East, doesn't know about these reports, about how these children are being treated? Of course they know it. The question is If they know it, how can they morally not condemn it and then stop it? People have argued to me that Biden is not the president of Israel. Of course I know that. But don't you think the president of United States, who just sent billions of dollars to state of Israel, don't you think he has some leverage if he wanted to do something? So these politicians, in my opinion, are bought and sold by powerful institutions. They don't represent us. They will never do the right thing. But you and me and millions upon millions of people like us, who care about justice, who care about humanity and humanity of the Palestinian people and Palestinian children, it's our turn to speak in solidarity with these children. And when you think about the Palestinian children right now in military jails, being treated as I just explained, think of your own children, how much you love them, what you will not do to protect them. And then look around yourself, ask yourself, what can I do to stop these atrocities against Palestinian children? If I can encourage you to just think that and feel that, that means part of my job is done. That what I'm saying has some meanings to you, that it moves your heart, right? And makes you think. It might also make you angry, right? But my approach throughout my life has been to channel my anger into positive transformation. Researching for this video and recording it has been painful to me. And I hope it moves your heart, right? And makes you do something in this world in solidarity with others where we can change this for better. That's all. Thank you so much for your support. The Palestine playlist will come up in a moment. Please find some time to watch it. Send me your words, your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas, because they keep me going. And I will, with your help, keep speaking about the rights of Palestinian people. Thank you, and peace and love.